Okay, so a warm welcome to everybody who's joining us for our annual D3 meeting. Thanks a lot for making time to be here today. We've had two wonderful sessions, one starting the day off with pipeline, access and financing, how those things fit together, looking at kind of the headwinds in terms of challenges in innovation and new discovery within NTDs. Both from a funding perspective and also from the actual innovator perspective. Some great talks and some great Q&A there at the end of that session. We then went into innovation in terms of data and data collaboration. So a great presentation by the Cure Drug Repurposing Collaboratory at the CDRC in the USA. Also the IDDO's clinical data sharing platform, then a real world look at how researchers are working in this space and how they could get involved in terms of sharing their data on these platforms. That brings us kind of neatly to the final session for the day. We wanted to bring a bit of disease focus into the mix. And one of the great success stories that we're all kind of familiar with really is that of sleeping sickness in terms of the approach to it and the wins that are occurring, the elimination of these countries. We've called this session Disease-Focused Sleeping Sickness, De-risking Discovery Through Partnerships and Driving Sustainability Through Access. They would seem to be the two cornerstones of underpinning the success of this approach in this disease setting. And there are loads of lessons I'm sure that other disease settings could learn from this. So we're absolutely delighted to be joined today by Dr. Philippe Neau, head of the Neglected Tropical Diseases Program at Global Health Sanofi. We've also got Dr. Florent, the access leader and regional HATplatform coordinator at the Drugs for Neglected Diseases Initiative, the DNDi from the DRC. He's in the audience, but Florent, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand and come back on a different link so we can add you in. And Dr. François Bompart, in terms of, he's the chair of the Access Committee at the DNDi. We had Dr. Carolina Batista earlier, who also involved in that committee, but at the chair of the committee, François Bompart will be speaking in terms of access in the DNDi for this particular session. I think that's enough from me. There's a lot to unpack in this, kind of redefining access, as it were. And I just wanted to kind of hand the floor over to Philippe Neau from Sanofi. So a round of applause, Philippe, for you. Hi there. I think, yep, you're ready to go.
Thank you very much, Cameron, for the organization of this very interesting symposium. And good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Philippe Neau. I am head of Neglected Tropical Disease Program within Sanofi. And I'm working for 25 years within Sanofi, developing new drugs and vaccines and providing access of these to patients. I am really glad today to share with you all the work that Sanofi and partners have done for many years to support the development of new drugs to treat the most vulnerable patients population in the world, and to demonstrate how innovative public-private partnership can accelerate development and patient access. And today, as you mentioned, I will focus on the successful example of sleeping sickness. So what is sleeping sickness? How is it caused? Human African trypanosomiasis, called also sleeping sickness, is a life-threatening neglected tropical disease. It is considered endemic in 36 sub-Saharan African countries, where about 60 million people are estimated to be at some level of risk of sleeping sickness, especially those living in poor and remote rural areas where health infrastructure is poor or non-existent. Sleeping sickness is transmitted to humans by the bite of tsetse flies, and the etiological agent is the parasite Trypanosoma brucei. There are two subspecies of this parasite, which are Trypanosoma brucei gambiense, responsible for the chronic form of the disease occurring in the Western and Central Africa, and the rhodesiense form, responsible for a more acute form occurring in Eastern and Southern Africa. The Gambian-Zeform is responsible for approximately 95% of sleeping sickness cases, with the highest disease burden in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The Rhodesian-Zeform is less frequent, but is significantly more severe, able to kill the patients in less than 18 months. The disease occurs in two stages. There is one stage, the first stage, the hemolymphatic phase, with around 18 months duration, with common signs and symptoms including fever, headache, pruritus, weaknesses, asthenia, anemia, and lymphadenopathy. And the stage 2, a more severe one with a meningoencephalitic stage, with a duration of around 8 months. It occurs when the parasites have crossed the blood-brain barrier, resulting with sleep disturbances, neuropsychiatric symptoms that may lead to coma and death if left untreated. Until recently, few therapeutic options were currently available to treat sleeping sickness at either the early stage or late stage. When sleeping sickness is diagnosed at early stage, patients can be treated in their villages with intramuscular injections of pentamidine for 7 days. In patients with late stage, a combination therapy called NECT, including nifurtimox and eflornithine, is administered, but only in hospital because it's infusion. The only treatment available to treat the rhodesiensis subtype is melarsoprol, which is an arsenic-based drug, highly toxic, killing up to 5% of patients. Sanofi is playing a critical role to fight against sleeping sickness for many years. Sanofi is working for more than 21 years with WHO, World Health Organization, to fight this disease. Since 2001, we are donating drugs to the WHO and provide financial support to improve awareness, screening, diagnosis, dedicated organizations, and the educational programs in the field. Also, in addition, we are providing cash to support other diseases such as Chagas disease, Leishmaniasis, and Urulibulcer. Sanofi is donating treatments for sleeping sickness, and by renewing recently its partnership with WHO, we are continue our commitment. In addition, through innovative collaborative approaches, our ambition is to contribute to eliminating sleeping sickness by 2030 as per WHO NTD roadmap. And I will talk further about this collaboration model. Thanks to this long-term collaborative efforts, we have seen amazing results. Imagine the annual number of patients since 2001 fell by 97%. And last year, we reached 800 cases. And since 2018, the number of cases remains below 1,000. In parallel, new countries like Togo, Benin, Uganda, Ivory Coast, and most recently, Equatorial Guinea confirmed elimination of sleeping sickness. Funding for research and development to find new treatments is typically limited, given that the potential return on investment is either very small or non-existent. But Sanofi is committed to continue research and development for vulnerable communities where others have stopped it. That is why, in addition of our collaboration with WHO, we are also partnering with DNDi, the Drug for Neglected Disease Initiative NGO, to develop and provide innovative drug for sleeping sickness to ensure patients living in the most remote areas have access to treatment. With this innovative public-private partnership with DNDi, Sanofi is bringing pharmaceutical and regulatory experience, while DNDi was able to conduct clinical studies in very difficult conditions. Imagine a number of patients significantly reduced in a very complex area and difficult places to conduct clinical trial. To do that in a reasonable time frame is really a challenge. Also, a statistical challenge is an add-on in order to demonstrate efficacy and safety for a new drug. And despite all of these challenges, together with the DNDi, we have been able to successfully develop a new chemical entity up to registration. Then in 2018, fexinazole was the first approved treatment for oral approved treatment for treating sleeping sickness. And this was approved in Democratic Republic of Congo. And since then, it has been developed and distributed in endemic countries. Fexinazole is an effective 10-day oral treatment able to cure early and late-stage patients. Imagine, for late-stage cases of sleeping sickness, we are coming from standard treatments administered only at hospitals with infusions during 40 days, the treatments weighing 40 kilos, very difficult to transport in the jungle and to the hospital. And now we have a fexinazole treatment, an oral treatment, and able to treat the patients in 10 days. Also, the lumbar puncture is now optional with this treatment. It is really fully changing the patient experience and access, thanks to this new drug and to this development. But we do not stop here. In parallel, we have kept investing and developing in new drugs such as acoziborole in partnership with DNDi. Acoziborole is a very promising oral one-day treatment only, which would enable a test and treat approach, transforming even further the patient journey. Think about having the drug in a bag, test the patient and give the drug if the test is positive. So if acoziborole is approved with sufficient evidence on safety, this treatment will be key and very powerful tool to reach sustainable elimination of sleeping sickness. But just developing new drugs is not enough. Very early in the process, the partners must think about access of these new drugs to the patients. And here we are thinking about access in sub-Saharan African countries in the most remote areas. Early anticipation of patient access is critical. So how can we accelerate upfront the registration of these new drugs and then access in the countries? For the example of fexinazole, we have put in place a capacity building approach where key countries such Democratic Republic of Congo were taking part of the drug regulatory dossier in parallel of the review of the European Medical Agency done at the same time. As a result, when EMA delivered a positive opinion in only 39 days, DRC approved the drug. 39 days after positive opinion of EMA, DRC registered the drug. It is a speed record in terms of registration. Then afterwards, the letter of acceptance by national authorities managed with WHO allowed importation distribution in the endemic countries. Further to accelerated registration and drug donations supported by Sanofi, the work done by WHO and DNDi are playing a critical role in providing access to patients. Moving forward, significant work is still required to sustain the current momentum against sleeping sickness and work towards the WHO 2030 goals for sleeping sickness elimination. Progress towards sleeping sickness surveillance and control into primary healthcare systems needs to be reinforced, and the WHO role will be critical here. There is absolutely necessity of retaining specialized skills associated with sleeping sickness management. Of course, when you think about the number of cases diminishing year by year, there is a high risk of losing experience of highly trained personnel from national programs, and also the vector controls must remain in place. In parallel, accurate and reliable diagnostic tools are essential requirement. Indeed, the actual standard sleeping sickness case definition implies a demonstration of the parasite in any body fluid via microscopy. However, there are some cases like low parasitemia associated with the complexity and low sensitivity of parasitological methods that make such demonstration difficult. One idea that is in case of positive antibody response, this may be an indirect sign of sleeping sickness that could indicate the presence of the parasite, even if not found in the body fluid. Then it has been suggested that to consider to treat individuals presenting positive antibody response without finding the parasite in the blood, considered as serosuspect individuals. In such circumstances, the use of the new treatment in development, named acoziborole, as mentioned before to you, would be a key asset. We should not also forget COVID-19. COVID-19 will remain among us for years, and still today we don't know how far it has impacted the vector control program and the monitoring of the cases. And we must not see a rebound of cases in the following years due to the pandemic. In conclusion, I would say that only strong collaborative partnership between all actors, the WHO, NGOs like DNDi, pharmaceutical industries, countries, communities, institutions, diagnostic players, will allow success of sleeping sickness elimination. Thanks to our long-term commitment, today we are in the last mile at which to eliminate a deadly, terrifying human disease. And if successful, that will be the first type of disease, deadly disease, eliminated without using a vaccine. So let's keep the momentum and work together to succeed. Thank you very much for your attention.
Philippe, thank you very, very much for that. It is a huge success story, and this whole collaborative kind of mindset and the way you've underpinned all of that movement really kind of goes to, it just shows in the results. You mentioned the record-breaking 49 days, I think it was, for the regulatory kind of approvals, 39 days, I think you said. And I'm sure there's much, much more to come, but I love the fact that you've underpinned that with all of the kind of collaborations that you've done at WHO and beyond. It really sets the scene for that. It's so encouraging to see a multinational pharma talking about this. It's fantastic. So we salute that. Wonderful. And thank you for that presentation. We are joined now by Dr. Florent Maubot from the DNDi. We had Florent in the audience there. So Florent, very nice to see you there. Florent is the access leader and regional HATplatform coordinator for the DNDi for the DRC. And so I think it would be a good time here to kind of hand the floor over to you, Florent, if that's okay. Florent, with you?
Maybe Carmen can share the slide. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I will talk about HAT access plan, HAT access activity next. This is the presentation plan. Maybe a little overview about HAT disease. A little overview about HAT disease. Philippe mentioned that human African trypanosomiasis, it is a parasite chronic disease with two forms, gambiensis and rhodesiensis. The last 15 and 20 years, the number of cases decreased. And then WHO targeted human African trypanosomiasis for elimination by the end of 2025 and the interruption of the transmission by the end of 2030. I will mention that the HAT access activity are linked with the HAT elimination strategy that are focused on passive case detection, active case detection, and case management, including the targeted vector control. Regarding the case management, for now, we are using efeximidazole, which is a full oral treatment for the 2 stages of the disease. And for the advanced stage, we continue to use the NECT. And the pentamidine is used for the early stage of the disease, both for the children below 6 years or 20 kilos. But the contribution of DNDi to WHO target is consisting to support the clinical trial for fexinidazole in Rhodesian form. I can remind you that until now, the treatment of Rhodesian form is based on melarsoprol. You say that melarsoprol is responsible of serious adverse events like encephalopathy arsenical. And another support from DNDi is to support acoziborol seropositive and pediatric studies by using the test and treat approach. And this study started in Q1 in 2022. Regarding the HAT access action plan, the overall objective is to treat 60 to 7% of HAT patients with fexinidazole by the end of 2024 and 95% with acoziborol by the end of 2029. Once the clinical study are finished. This objective is based on supporting training of health staff in endemic countries, including fexinidazole, supporting the data collection and also contributing to the strengthening of national pharmacovigilance system to the most endemic countries in order to support the sustainable reporting, to contributing to case detection and patient management for elimination, and also to support the communication material and activity in order to promote community awareness after social science research. Significant achievement we obtain during HAT access activity or process. We supporting the training of fexinidazole, which is completed to different endemic countries: South Sudan, Cameroon, Angola, Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Uganda, DRC, Central Africa, and Chad. We organize also, we supporting also the training of diagnostic tools completed in DRC and Guinea. We supporting some national PV unit as South Sudan, Guinea, and DRC. We supported endemic countries to adopt, to revisitize their national guideline according to guideline provided by WHO in South Sudan, Cameroon, Uganda, Cameroon, Angola, Congo, Uganda, DRC, Central Africa, and Chad. And we guide the endemic country to obtain the authorization of use of fexinidazole in different countries as requested by WHO in South Sudan, Cameroon, Uganda, Cameroon, Angola, Congo, DRC, and Chad. Now DNDi is supporting acoziborol clinical trials, including seropositive and pediatric patients. This study started at Q1 2022 in Guinea and DRC. We supported also educational material for HAT adapted in the context of low prevalence in DRC and Uganda. We supported also HAT passive screening by integration of HAT package in the health service in DRC. Until the supply of fexinidazole in different endemic countries, until the end of March 2022, more than 250 patients have been treated with fexinidazole, representing more than 50% of the patients treated with fexinidazole in DRC, in Chad, in Guinea, in Equatorial Guinea, and in Gabon. This table show the process followed by each country from the guideline revision until the treatment of the patients in each endemic countries. Despite this activity, this success for HAT activity, we have some challenge for HAT access to discuss with the panel. For example, the difficulty to confirm the decrease of HAT cases without regular HAT surveillance in the most endemic countries. I want to mention that the adaptation of HAT access activity for elimination depend on the progress of HAT research results. For example, we are waiting also for the acosiborole seropositive and pediatric study before revisitize the guideline to adapt certain the strategy from WHO to endemic countries. Another challenge is how to boost passive screening in rural area with endemic population living in the poverty in the context of low prevalence. How to integrate HAT package and pharmacovigilance in the health system for sustainability without a sufficient financial support from endemic countries. This is the challenge we can face with in different endemic countries. Thank you very much for your attention.
Florent, thank you very, very much for that. A wonderful deep insight there into the actual access programs that are on the ground in the DRC, and the last slide of some of the headwinds you're expecting, especially this integration to the pharmacovigilance kind of the national level. Very, very interesting indeed, and we really appreciate that. Thank you. I'm sure that's going to come. Some questions are going to come up in terms of the audience questions on that. But thank you very, very much for that. So we've had Philippe speaking really about the disease etiology, the kind of partnerships, WHO, DNDi, and then kind of this. Say challenges, but difficulties in terms of linking this with the diagnostics. Florent's kind of given us that open look in terms of the local access programs in DRC and the kind of issues around that. So we're going to move now to the final kind of speaker for the session, Dr. François Bompart from the DNDi, the chair of the Access Committee. François, I'm going to hand the floor over to you, and your presentation is actually there. So
yes,
it's there.
Thank you very much, Cameron, for this very kind introduction. Thank you also to Philippe and to Florent for setting the stage. Indeed, the sleeping sickness elimination initiative is definitely a flagship initiative, both for Sanofi and for DNDi. I happen to have worked in both institutions, so I'm really delighted to make the sort of, I wouldn't say the concluding, let's say the third presentation of this session, to try to enlarge in terms of access, not going from sleeping sickness to the other neglected tropical diseases we deal with at DNDi. So the first issue we had when we started talking about access is how to define it. And there are many different ways of describing access. The simplest one we have found, the one that works really well for us, is to say access is basically whatever stands between the treatment and the patient who needs that treatment. So access to care occurs when there are no obstacles between the patient and the treatment this patient needs. And you will see that our approach to dealing with access is very much around identifying obstacles that stand between the patient and the treatment. The second thing we've done is to try to say, what is DNDi's role in access? We feel that we have a clear duty to work on access, but with some limitations in scope and in time. Some limitations because DNDi is primarily an organization that was set up to perform research and development, and we are only able to solve some very specific access issues. For instance, if a new treatment or a new formulation is needed to address access barriers, then of course we have a definite role to play. But otherwise, the number of issues that are involved in the field of access are so multiple that we cannot deal with them all, especially since also we deal with 7 or 8 different diseases, HAT being only one of them. So we say, okay, we have a duty to work on access because our ultimate objective is certainly not to develop drugs, but to make sure that patients are treated and lives are saved. But we feel that we have a responsibility to at least identify the key access barriers and find the partners that can deal with those barriers. And the challenge for us is to do that for every treatment we develop, each of which is a universe in itself, and for each country where we want to facilitate access. And of course, go a lot of challenges because each country is quite unique in its ability to ensure access to patients. So what we have done is to design a very simple framework to help us think about access barriers throughout diseases and throughout countries. And keeping the idea of, access is whatever happens between the patient and the treatment, we've said it all starts with the demand. And that demand is based on a diagnosis. Based on a diagnosis, someone must prescribe a drug for a specific patient. This is where it all starts. Once this is done, then the drug must be brought to the patient. There must be no systemic obstacle preventing access to care. I'll come back to that. And of course, all the costs must be covered. You understand immediately that these are very broad sets of issues. These are very simple words to describe very complex situations. And the image I keep using is that of chains. Each of these 4 sets of issues for me is a chain, because it is made up of lots of different links. And each of these chains need to perform equally well throughout time, throughout geographies. And of course, the difficulty with chains is that it's enough for one link to be broken for the whole chain to collapse, and therefore for the whole access not to happen. So this is what we are dealing with, a very complex set of issues, but which we have tried to categorize using very, very simple terms. So let me explain to you very quickly what we put behind these 4 words of demand, supply, systemic obstacles, and financing. When it comes to demand, what we're looking for are challenges, obstacles in a variety of fields. The first one is disease awareness. Are our decision makers, our caregivers, our patients aware of the disease? That, of course, where demand starts, with awareness of the disease. Diagnosis, where do patients get diagnosed? Is the treatment adapted to patients and the caregivers' needs? What are the treatment guidelines? Who prescribes? On what basis? Where does prescription happen? And then what is adherence to treatment? So with this sort of checklist approach, we analyze the obstacles to demand in each of the countries we work in for each of the treatment we deal with. Likewise, when it comes to supply, under that very broad umbrella, we put issues related with intellectual property status. Is intellectual property an obstacle to access? Regulatory approval an obstacle to access? What are the mechanisms to align demand and supply? It's a huge challenge. What is the capacity of commodities manufacturing versus forecasts? I'm using commodities here to say that it's not just about medicines, it's also about diagnostic tools. And this is very important to take into account, of course, bearing in mind that diagnosis is where it all starts. And then the supply chains. How effective are they to bring those commodities where they are needed? Third category, systemic obstacles. So we ask ourselves the question, are there reasons why people don't have access based on their gender, their ethnicity, their age, stigma, and so on? The example I usually take, which to me speaks a lot, is to say if you're dealing with a disease, for instance, HIV, where you have a very high number of patients who are affected because they inject drugs. If in this country the law makes it a crime to use injectable drugs, then the law is an obstacle to access because these patients will go into hiding. They will be invisible. So therefore, this is a systemic obstacle standing in the way of care for IV drug users, and you can remove it working with lawmakers. So this is what we mean by systemic obstacles. And then last but not least, obviously, all of this has got to be paid for. So what we do is we identify the financing challenges that are based on what mechanisms exist. Are there international, national, out-of-pocket schemes? Who pays for diagnosis? How much does diagnosis paid? And then, of course, what is the cost of treatment and who pays? And in this, of course, we include not just the cost of the treatments and the diagnostic commodities, but also, of course, the cost of hospital consultations and so forth, the time spent out of work, travel time for families and so forth. So these are the obstacles we are trying to identify in this fourth and highly important category of financing. And therefore, the way, to summarize things, the way we build access plans for each new treatment is, first of all, we identify priority countries for the introduction of the new treatment. And Philippe and Florent have shown to you which are the priority countries we work in for sleeping sickness. It's only if we focus on the limited number of countries that we can seriously expect to carry out the second critical task, which is identifying obstacles to access in the 4 dimensions I have mentioned. So looking at the limited number of countries, very limited number of countries, we look at obstacles in demand, supply, systemic obstacles, and financing, of course, through partners. We cannot do everything directly at DNDi. And once we have identified those obstacles to access, then we can identify the partners. And we feel that with this approach, we can make a lot of difference. Clearly, sleeping sickness is a very specific program, but here you find the 4 dimensions with very specific features. When it comes to demand, we are very fortunate when it comes to HAT to have very well-organized national HAT programs. We have simpler treatments available. This was discussed by Philippe and Florent. And there is a lot of work going on regarding informing patients, informing communities, informing caregivers about diagnosis and treatment of this disease. For supply, again, we are very fortunate with sleeping sickness because there is a very specific drug donation program and a totally dedicated supply chain. Structural obstacles, as Florent was saying, are many, nevertheless. Patients oftentimes are in remote places, they are oftentimes poor. We deal with countries where the local health systems are very uneven, very weak in some parts of the key countries we deal with. And there are very, very interesting, fascinating challenges posed by the perspective of elimination. How can you keep people's interest when the elimination of a disease is in sight? So this is a structural obstacle that we have to deal with. And then financing, again, we are very fortunate so far, at least, because thanks to Sanofi and other funders, there are very specific financing mechanisms, donation programs. But again, how do you keep people's interest when elimination is in sight? So in a nutshell, this is what we wanted to share with you. But to conclude, we also need to remember that patients are never affected by a single disease. And this pertains specifically to patients affected by neglected tropical diseases. And our summary slide to conclude is to say, we are very much aware that economic, social, cultural, and political determinants are the reason why neglected tropical diseases are not more visible and patients are not more visible. And therefore, we need to keep advocating for integration of those neglected patients into universal health coverage. That's the only way these people can sustainably be properly taken care of. So this is our best option and our ultimate objective. Thank you for your attention. And
thank you.
And thank you to our partners. Sorry, Cameron. The least I can do is thank our partners, of course.
Okay, so I'll come back and I'll say thank you very much for that. It was superb to see access there in such depth, and it's such a primary focus. We know the DNDi have got a lot of history when it comes to really redefining access and the importance of it. I'm not just talking about flexinidazole, but also, benznidazole in terms of your Chagas award. You had your access programs in place there. We've seen throughout the day how important it is becoming a critical component. And that's very interesting. You link that to UHC. Perhaps this access consideration will be the gateway for that. So that's fantastic presentation. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Some great feedback for all the presenters, actually. So I'll just read some of this out to you. Just 1 second. There we go. So where have we gone? I've just lost it on my screen. There we go. So, people are coming, great presentations. Elon Pinheiro from Fiocruz, Brazil, saying, great presentation. We've had other people commenting on that as well. So people are really, there's a lot of resonance with the audience in terms of what you're trying to get across. Some questions have come through again. So I think it could be a good time to bring the panelists back and just start the Q&A. And I would say to the audience, these sessions are for you in terms of asking the questions, getting those questions in. It's a great opportunity. We will definitely try and weave those in. We've got a little bit more time than we need, so it should be fine. Everybody's back. If I could just ask you to stop that presentation, I'll try and do it.
How can I do that?
Sorry, I've done it. There we go. There we go. Perfect. So, just firstly, just something that just sprang into mind there for a second. Philippe, you mentioned some of the headwinds that you were anticipating in terms of, it's a great success story, obviously, but you mentioned, I think you used the word difficulties, but, the headwinds in terms of challenges, linking all of this to the diagnostic dimension, just picking up on that, and then something that Florent said as well. And the question from all of that, just to push that to you, is how are you going to boost that diagnostic screening when it comes to rural areas? We're talking about no equipment, this training gap that you mentioned, community engagement comes into it as well. So how are you going to get to that point in terms of linking this with the diagnostic dimension and the issues around that? I'll ask that to Philippe first, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you, Cameron, for this very, very difficult question, which is the key one for me. This is key question. This is a key question. The diagnostic piece is critical here. Obviously, we need to have the best diagnostic approach for this sleeping sickness disease, where there will be less and less cases, and we need to be sure when there is a positive test of the disease that it is real disease, and we know that the sensitivity of the test and susceptibility is not 100%, and there is still need some research on this field, where we know that there is less and less interest because there will be less and less patients, and this is where we need to continue to partner with FINE, with a diagnostic company, to be sure that we continue to invest in these diagnostics, to continue to distribute also the tests, because of course they have to be free of charge, especially for this type of disease, and to address the situation where we may be in a situation where we don't have this test of cure existing. Today is not existing, the test of cure, the diagnostic test of cure. Ideally, it would be the one. This is where the new oral drug would support, but I fear it will not be sufficient. So we need to continue on this. We need to also to be sure that we continue to test for sleeping sickness. One idea, for example, was to test sleeping sickness and malaria together, in order to avoid the fact that we are losing in mind the sleeping sickness disease. But when I discuss with diagnostic partners, they say we tried it, but it's not working very well. And really, for me, thinking about sustainable elimination of the disease is also to think about how, in the diagnostic approach, we can do this together.
Yeah. That's a fantastic answer. And I know I put you on the spot there, Philippe, with that critical, but I think that was a wonderful answer. To get a different perspective on that answer, because in terms of the screening in rural areas, we've mentioned equipment, we've mentioned training, the gap, community engagement, and I'm going to ask this both to Florent first, because you're on the ground in DRC, and you mentioned some of these access initiatives that are going on, and then also from a kind of holistic access issue, I'll ask that to François. So firstly to Florent, in terms of the community engagement required to push the sustainability of screening, or at least adoption of screening by those rural communities, what would you how do you envisage that unrolling, this community engagement dimension? To Florent.
Okay.
What needs to be done? Yeah.
Okay, about community engagement, we know during the period 20 years ago, when we have the high prevalence of disease in endemic countries, the community engagement was very, very high. Now, with the decrease of the number of the cases in the context of the low prevalence, the population didn't go to active screening, didn't attend active screening, or go to the health facility to be examined. That now we conduct a qualitative research about the perception of the affected population living in endemic area. We want to know how they didn't engage to the active screening on passive screening in the field. They say that sometimes they didn't engage because we used the toxic drug in the past. But now we have the oral drug, less toxic than the drug we used 20 years ago, like the melarsoprol. It was a toxic drug. Even this drug saved the population living in endemic area, but now we have the oral drug, less toxic. We can use that without performing the lumbar puncture. This is the way that the population wants to engage to the art activity in the field, because we have now the new tools about diagnostic and also about therapeutic. I can give you the example now. Fexinidazole is used in the field. The population say that why you didn't provide us this drug many years ago. We are waiting the drug we can take orally, so that we can use the drug maybe at home. Now we can use the drug at home, supervised by the health center ID. Now we can use the drug. The patient came to the health facility, take the drug, and go back and can also do some economic activity in the villages. That's why for this engagement, we adapt the educational material. You know that after 20 years, now we have the young men, they didn't know sleeping sickness, but we want to focus the sensitization towards the young men and also to the women, so that after the school, the children can learn the parent about sleeping sickness at home?
That's a fantastic answer, actually, Florent. Really head on, tackling it head on. It's quite a brave answer, actually, that you're really communicating to them their misconceptions, but showing them how this is a real solution to that, and how they should actually get on board. That's a fantastic answer, and thank you for that. François, in terms of your kind of holistic access view on that.
Thank you, and I very much second what Florent was saying. So let me speak, as you say, maybe from a broader perspective about the challenges we have to deal with communities. The first one is that, of course, you need to go at the level of the village, of the community. So you need people on the spot who can identify what are the preconceived ideas, what is the level, and so forth. So this is something that DNDi is not equipped for. So we need to go through partners, because each of the approach needs to be tailor-made to the realities of that place. Another issue we have is we don't want to be one more NGO knocking on people's door. I mean, there are places in the world, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, where you have dozens of NGOs, each fighting for their pet subtopic, and this creates huge problems for people. So we really want to work with the local authorities to make sure that, all of this is organized, and we are not one more NGO, well-meaning, bothering people and creating difficulties for the people. So that's another thing. And the last thing is the difficulty when we speak about communities, it's sometimes difficult. When you deal with the world of HIV, you have oftentimes very well organized representative people you can speak to. When you deal with other diseases, it's not the case. And when you look at DNDi, we deal, for instance, with leishmaniasis, pediatric diseases. How can you get the voice of kids affected with leishmaniasis? So we need to find surrogates. And this is one of the issues we want to discuss with our DNDi Access Committee, is how can we get the voice of the communities, of the end users in the end, brought in at the right times for us to make the right decisions in terms of developing the right drugs and doing whatever it takes to ensure access. Because of course, the big challenge we have with access, it's never done. It's not like registering a drug, it's done once and for all. Access, there is always something that can go wrong. So this needs to be worked on a continuous basis, and looking at things that can go wrong at any time.
That's a superb answer. And again, putting the end user or that community right in the middle of everything. That's a brilliant answer, and a very commendable answer to that. There are a lot of questions coming through, and I'm going to just pick some of these out. So thank you to the audience for asking some of these. I know that I'm going to weave some of them together actually and try some magic actually on these, just to streamline some of these. So Annabelle Monet from Sanofi is asking, thanks a lot for these great presentations. The panel is a wonderful example of success of public-private partnerships. And what a great illustration of the complementary nature of each partner to ensure people's access to the NTD treatment. I was going to take that and just add something to that, which is, you've on this partnership, because Philippe, you alluded to it in your presentation, and François just mentioned it just now in terms of the people, and Florence mentioned that from a on the ground in DRC perspective. Just coming back to the question I'm going to ask, you mentioned partnerships, Philippe. You identify kind of partners, as it were. You identify blocks to access, and then you get new partners. What I wanted to ask you is, clearly the partnerships we're talking about here are working. Yeah, they're working for Sanofi, they're working for DNDi. It's a great example. Some of those blocks or resistors to that partnership happening, or this process rolling out, mean that you might have to look outside of the health sector. You mentioned the WHO and that long-term partnership with Sanofi really leveraged and possibly even help with the shortening of the registration time in DRC because all the right contacts are in place. How far outside of healthcare are you looking to partner to alleviate some of these training gap issues, some of the kind of this rural area kind of engagement? Is that something that Sanofi would look at?
So Sanofi, as you know, is a big pharma company, and having little, to be honest, little assets and presence in these countries in Africa. That's why doing ourselves the work a local level, it's almost impossible. So for me, going to these countries in Africa is almost impossible. So that's why it's important to build this partnership, to build this on long term, and to build with the people having the access to the field. That's why we are here today with when we speak about DNDi with WHO, and this is critical in this success. But as we did for sleeping sickness, we set the scene. So, for example, when we started this WHO collaboration many years ago, the fact that WHO was able to go in the field and to prepare some organization having structure, taking care of sleeping sickness, then DNDi was able to go in this field and benefit of this organization in place to conduct the clinical trials. And I think this is where this is the magic of this partnership, is really using the each expertise, and where we can bring in, as I mentioned, is a regulatory piece, having accelerating the dossier, how to build the dossier, submitting the dossier. This is something we can do, but we need absolutely our partners to go in the field and to deliver in the field. And to come back to the question of access, all of this has to be anticipated and thought in advance. Because again, if we don't think about this, we may be in the situation of having a new drug, very nice drug, but without being able to distribute it at the right people, the right country, the right place. And that's where we each partnership have to be anticipated, taking into account the differences in terms of organization. There's something I would like to share is what my day-to-day job when I'm managing a partnership between WHO, between an NGO, between a big pharma. The company size, the company way of thinking, the company goals and objectives, even if we're all working for the same ultimate goal for patients, we are different bodies. We have different ways of thinking, and building the momentum to have everybody working together in the same direction for such different companies. It's a challenge.
That's a great answer, actually, as well, to quite a complex question, actually. So thank you for that. There's a question from Clara Lima, and Clara is at the Parasite Disease Group, I3S, in Porto, in Portugal. And I want to ask this because she's asking a question really referring to the zoonotic scenario, so the tsetse fly and all of this coming into this, the animal reservoir for human African trypanosomiasis. The question she's asking, is there a platform of collaboration between animal health providers and human healthcare providers? You know, and I kind of add to that, do you think that's a very good way of getting closer to those rural communities who have those animals with them, who have direct, they're right in the nexus point of that zoonotic transmission kind of cycle? Florent, I'll ask you from the ground, is there room to make these kind of collaborations with the animal health providers and human healthcare providers? Would it help your cause?
Okay, maybe at regional level, we have a IRCT. It is an international scientific council organized by African Union. They are organizing the scientific meeting between the expert, the researcher from trypanosomiasis, animal trypanosomiasis, and also for human African trypanosomiasis. They are sharing during this scientific meeting some research results about animal reservoir and also about human African research. Donc they can join. I will maybe because of COVID situation, we didn't organize this international scientific meeting. I think that during the next year, this scientific meeting will be organized by African Union. I will share with her the link of the platform so that he can also share his result during this meeting.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
And from that,
maybe
Philippe,
to that point, I can have an add-on which makes a link to a previous question you had about diagnostic, because it's true that there is a risk of having a reservoir within animals of the parasites, and especially true for rhodesiense. I had also the question about diagnostic in these animals. Do we have the possibility to diagnose these animals in terms of having the parasite in these animals? And again, the question of diagnostic is critical here, because what I understood is that today we have only low sensitivity tests with a cross reaction with other parasites in the animal, and this is maybe something we need to also focus on, and in order to monitor the parasite also in animals. But definitely, I agree. We need to have the big picture here when we speak about elimination of a parasite, including animal piece, and we should be able to make some bridges between animal and human health.
And I think that's a dotted line to enhancing the how to put this, the use of the HAT tools within the national surveillance systems. If you're going to get closer to national surveillance, then you're going to have to attach to outside let's say the zoonotic community as an example, or the people involved at the animal health level. You're going to have to attach yourself to that as well to then perhaps boost the case building for adoption into national surveillance programs. So there are a lot of positives in that. There are some questions that I have to ask because you wanted to very kindly ask, so I'm going to throw these at you. And it's very kind of them to ask that, and we do appreciate that. This is obviously very immersive and we love that. There's lots of them, so I'm just going to quickly throw some off to you. So from Dr. Janice Lasdens, you split the TDR as an R&D partner, and this is equally applicable to either of you, to Sanofi, the big partner, or the DNDi. This is equally applicable. What is your role in defining the price of the product and making the product available where donations are not applicable? Pricing is always a horrible thing for that door to open, but I've had to open it. There we go.
Yeah, I don't know whether I can be very precise on that, except to say that this is, of course, a key discussion point every time we enter into a new project and into a new partnership with a pharma partner, because of course our temptation is to try and negotiate for the lowest possible price, but we also know that there is a price to pay, in a way, if I could say so, for bargaining for a very cheap price, because as I said, access is a long chain of events, and within this chain, everyone needs to make a decent living. If someone brings a drug to the remotest part of a country, it's because that person is making a living out of it. So, it's a fine balance we have. So I don't have an easy sort of ready-made answer for this, except to say that it's a very, very important and key question, of course, which sometimes require also rediscussing between the early days when everything was rosy until reality hits. Yeah. Of course, the situation is also very different whether you are in a competitive space or a non-competitive space. So I don't think there is an easy answer for that. Philippe, any bright idea?
So of course this is critical. At least for sleeping sickness, we are in a situation where we are donating the drug. So it is not a matter of price of the drug by itself. But I would like to highlight one important point is that today we are developing new drugs. We have vexinazole and we will add on acoziborol, but we do not stop the other drugs. And when we speak about the previous drugs already existing, we continue to produce them. And while the number of patients is diminishing year by year, and this is less than 1,000, we have now five to six drugs soon able to produce for these patients in very, very low volumes, and to find industrial partner to produce such low level is more and more difficult. and what is interest of a pharmaceutical partner
Yeah.
to produce such low level of low numbers along the time. And this is something we are facing really today, and I am working very hard on this to be sure that over the time, along the years, we will be able to continue to produce these drugs, and believe me, it is really a challenge. And also in parallel, when we speak about the cost, when we speak about only hundreds of patients, the cost of the treatment of each patient is huge. So, and this is also the question we have to keep in mind when we think about elimination, because of course the last patients are very, very expensive, but we have to succeed in the elimination, otherwise we will be stuck.
That's a great answer, and a really high, absolutely. The tail end, the unit cost per treatment is going to increase with those last, absolutely. So that kind of leaves a dotted line to one of the shifts in the WHO's roadmap is about kind of country empowerment, right? Moving from a country ownership model, and within that you've got this whole releasing financial capital in the country, which you kind of covered in an earlier thing, but there's also then the political will that needs to be kind of open. How do you go about doing that with partnerships? You mentioned the WHO, but I'm going to ask all of you this, because I think that's we talk often about financing, people are talking about pricing of drugs, donation of drugs as well, all of that kind of wraps into that. But the political will, you just had a registration in 39 days. I think you said 39. If I got it wrong, it's 49. That's absolutely amazing and absolutely a win. How much more, and how do you leverage political will in that way? What are the kind of, what would you give? What would you say worked? I don't know how to put that properly.
Again, it's very difficult to answer that question in general terms, because you can always find a situation where this will not work. You need to do an assessment of the situation and see what is going to work best. Is it convincing that there is a good economic case to be made for dealing with the disease? Is there a way you can bundle that disease with another one? For instance, we've worked on hepatitis C, and hepatitis C is an infectious disease, but which goes really well with chronic diseases, diagnosis, things like that. So I think you need every time to ask yourself, what are the best arguments, who holds the decision, and then you find the best partners. Oftentimes we found that talking with parliamentarians, talking of course with political decision makers, oftentimes helps us understand what are the levers, what are the cards to play. After that, it's very it's got to be specific disease by disease. But as I'm saying this, I keep insisting on my conclusion slide, which is to say, whatever we talk about when we talk about neglected diseases, we never forget to advocate for universal health coverage. We need to keep whatever we do for the short term, which is wonderful for the patients, is only it's not going to solve long-term problem. It's only if we all push for universal health coverage, I think that we stand a chance of taking care, especially of the most neglected patients.
That's a great answer. Florent, in terms of when we're talking about getting political will, politicians are not going to be speaking biochemistry with anybody, right? They're looking at different language. The people, how can we involve those communities as a voice to, or what are your views on that,
Well, maybe I can complete François about political will. According to my experience in the field, when I met some policy makers in different endemic countries, I'll say that the need are focuses on the big disease like malaria, tuberculosis, and also HIV in different countries. But some neglected disease, the policymaker can leave that to the partners, to the NGO, so that they can take this situation in charge. But now we support the endemic countries so that they can mention in the budget some line about NTD, some NTD. Maybe even they can be able to finance the line, but they can start to mention the line in the budget in different countries. We collaborated with one NGO, PAT, which organized some meeting with the parliamentary in DRC, in provincial and in national level, so that there can be a way to mention also maybe trypanosomiasis in the budget of the country, so that we can have some lines, some budgets, so that they can also support some activity regarding to purchase testing, some testing kits, and also to provide some transportation for testing kits from national level to provincial level. Yeah. But it is not very died, but we continue the advocacy with some endemic countries, but it is not very going hard so that they can be able to finance, to put the money in the budget regarding some NTD. Yeah. Bon, some maybe in DRC, the government started to purchase some kit tests for some NTD, but the amount is very low to cover all the need of the countries. Yeah.
Well, that's a great answer, and hopefully the good news from the Equatorial Guinea example, just a few days ago, Philippe, you'd mentioned it. I think that's just a few days ago where they announced it. That kind of momentum building on the other countries will hopefully help to galvanize some part of the political machinery, the political will to actually step in and help and assist these processes moving forward. So that could be something to look out for.
Sorry, Cameron. This is precisely the point I should have made maybe more clearly. And here, listening to the three of you now, yeah, in a nutshell, I think the best way to deal with political decision makers is to have one political decision maker talking to another one, and that pleads for us to pick a very limited number of key countries where we build capacity, where we go in depth, we understand who plays, and then have these countries be sort of champion countries, which can then be emulated by other countries. So that calls for having focused efforts. If we spread ourselves too thin, being a small organization, we're going to waste our time. So we pick a limited number of countries and we help them become champion countries, exemplary countries, which can emulate others.
Well, that's a fantastic answer, and that's in line with kind of keeping the solution at local level, as it were, having that local flavor in there as well. Ambassadors, champions, advocates from within those communities. Yeah, absolutely. So that kind of has a lot of resonance with your overall access kind of view on that. So it's excellent. There was a question there. It came from Professor Dr. Derek Robinson. He's at the University of Bordeaux. He's also one of the chairs at the British Society for Parasitology. Actually, and he was asking a question. Really, I'm going to put them together. So, can fexinidazole work as well for Chagas disease and leishmaniasis? Not only on a biochemical level, have you seen any activity, any screens there? But he's also then referring to access and the problems associated with the same kind of communities might be co-infected. There might, be an exposure. Are there any moves to change disease setting on fexinidazole at all?
François, you want to answer on this?
No, I'm not knowledgeable enough about this.
Okay.
So I know that there were some tests of fexinidazole in Chagas, and for now they were not conclusive enough to move forward in more advanced clinical trials.
Oh, well, that's a great. Well, that's the answer, Derek, Dr. Robinson, for you there. So hopefully that's good. We've kind of come to the end, really. I'm being asked that we have to kind of come to the end of that. Sorry, just give me 1 second to do that. Yeah. I mean, the future is incredibly bright. Do you see this as being the blueprint for other diseases? This kind of putting access in the middle, putting partnerships in the middle. I know everything's nuanced, different countries, different diseases, different types of issues. But as a primary blueprint, it's worked so well. Will you be communicating this to different disease settings?
If I could start speaking, indeed, I think it can be used as a blueprint to illustrate precisely the point I was trying to make, which is to say, we have chosen by convention 4 key dimensions to access, and HAT is a great example of why you need to deal with all of them at the same time with the same level of attention. If you only deal with 1 or 2 of these dimensions, access will not happen. But as we've said, HAT is a very, very specific, a quite unique situation where we had all the sort of stars aligned, and thankfully for that. But it illustrates really, yes, I agree. You need to deal with all the issues at the same time. Otherwise, everything is going to collapse, and you will have wasted your time, basically. So yes, in that sense, yes, it's a great blueprint for us.
Fantastic. And from Sanofi's perspective, thank you for that, François. Philippe, from Sanofi's perspective, in terms of you're active across different rabies, snakebite, all sorts of things, would this have an impact in those approaches? Do you think that people will be coming?
I think the approach we have today is really to be sure that we will succeed at least in this disease, and to be sure that we will go up to the end instead of trying different things and really today we say, okay, we have the one, and maybe we will be the key partner able to succeed in this elimination, which would be fantastic. And my position would be to even further collaborate with other partners like diagnostic, for example, on others, to be sure that we will succeed and to keep the momentum and push. Maybe even also the political aspects for succeeding in this, instead of trying something different of something or other disease. I think that would be the approach.
That's a fantastic answer. Thank you for that. Tomorrow, obviously, is our diagnostics day. I don't know how your schedules are, but on the back of, if you have all the sessions are amazing. We're ending the day with a capacity building session, looking at kind of building microscopy capacity, building surveillance capacity across Africa. That might have been interesting kind of foil to what we've been speaking about today, and things that, as an example, Florent, you'd mentioned some of these training gaps and some of the issues at rural level. And so that might be answered in some of that session tomorrow. I'd like to say thank you very, very much. Sadly, we're going to have to call it a day in terms of the timing. And I'd just like to say thank you very, very much. A lot of the audience are saying thank you, great presentations. Thanks for answering that question. There are a few other questions in there. So Dr. Ellen Pinheiro, I apologize. I've asked the pricing one, but public production and this whole thing, I haven't really, we're going to have to cut that because we have no time to ask that. So I do apologize if I've missed anybody out or not involved in that kind of stream. But I just like to say thank you very, very much to Philippe. Thank you very, very much to François. Thank you very, very much to Florent, all 3 of you for joining us and going through quite a long process with us, because we had all sorts of stuff going on to get to this point. Delighted we had this session, and thanks a lot to the wonderful, wonderful audience. I hope you can all join us tomorrow for the Diagnostics Day, Day 2 of our 9th annual D3. Lots of food for thought. And everybody's basically, Roleo, Toy and Emmanuel, thank you for the insightful presentation. Clara, Lima, amazing talks. Thank you all. Everybody's kind of echoing that. So a round of applause, a virtual round of applause for all of you. Thanks a lot. Wishing you all a wonderful evening and a safe evening wherever you are. And I hope you can, the link for tomorrow's first session has miraculously appeared in the chat. And we'll be resending all of that out in any case. All of you take care. And adieu. And we'll see you. Some Gert Jan Wijant saying great presentations. Thank you. Lots of echoing of that. Yeah, I think that's enough from me. And I'm standing between you and the pub, or standing between you and dinner. So I'm going to back out. Guys, we salute you.
Thank you, Cameron.
Everybody. All
Thank
right.
you very much, Cameron.
Thank you.
Take care,
Bye-bye.
everyone.